Welcome to part 2 of my Tortured Poets Department postmortem. The whole reason we even have a part 2 is because the Tortured Poets Department was a double album. At 2 a.m., Taylor Swift revealed the Anthology, 15 more tracks including the physical bonus tracks that were on the vinyl variants. In this video, we're going to talk about some general thoughts that I had before I go into each track piece by piece before I sign the Anthology, and maybe the whole record a score. I'll also point out some extra cool observations I made about the standard and discuss the Fortnite video at the very end. Before I start, I do want to congratulate Taylor for the insane 313 million stream debut on Spotify. This is the single day record of all time. If we count just the standard version's 232 million streams, Tortured Poets actually beat Midnight's 184.9 million debut, which I believe also counts the 3 a.m. bonus tracks. In one day, it has actually become Swift's biggest sales week in her career, selling approximately 1.7 million versus 1989 TV's 1.6 million week. This is an unprecedented golden era commercially for Swift. I do not think we will see these numbers in our lifetime again, unless it's from her. Okay, so here are my general thoughts. Anyone who is on the fence about the standard, I think you need to give this second half of the project an honest try. These 15 tracks are genuinely excellent and seem to improve upon many of the shortcomings people had about the standard version. People who are mad at the record for resembling too much of Midnight's will be thrilled to see a collection of more analog and acoustic sounding tracks. The songwriting still maintains the somber and stark shape that it has on the standard, but we actually get room to breathe in the lyricism. I actually found myself hearing the words rather than reaching for my phone to read them. Fans expecting something more coherent and cohesive need to realize why Taylor named this half an anthology. An anthology is defined as a collection of poems or other pieces of writing. Anthologies are usually not chronological. Apparently, in genre fiction, anthologies can contain short stories or novellas, each with unrelated casts, characters, and settings. One could argue that Folklore and Evermore were the original anthologies, more on that later. This Tortured Poets anthology does not attempt to chart its own story or define a narrative, at least in the same way that the standard does. Each song feels self-contained, and while I do wish that some made the standard version, I get it. I understand why they were put on this half. Interestingly enough, 12 out of the 15 tracks were produced by Aaron Dessner, who worked on a majority of the acclaimed and adored Folklore and Evermore. It's ironic because Jack produced 12 of the standard 16, which brings me to this point. Based on how much I preferred this half of the album and how a bunch of Swifties in my circles think that Swift Enough has hit critical mass, I do think that it's time for the two to take somewhat of a break from each other, not forever, but maybe for the next record. Two of the tracks that Jack worked on for this half, Thank You Amy and I Look in People's Windows, have co-producers, Dessner on the former and Patrick Berger on the latter, and I actually did really like those. Sure, Jack and Taylor make hits and have produced some of the best music I've heard in my lifetime, but I loved hearing Taylor's voicing not be washed out in reverb or hearing the same drum kits over and over again. This mirrors how much I love the 3 a.m. version of Midnight's over the standard. I think it's just from saturation. The exhaustion definitely started around the 1989 tracks, which were all Jack. To circle back to my points about Folklore and Evermore, I'm tempted to treat the anthology as the unofficial, mythical third Woodvale record just from its sound. If you joined it as a Swiftie because of Folk, Evermore, or really adore those eras, these collection of tracks are perfect for you. Personally, the anthology hit harder for me on first listen than the standard did. My one last general observation I had was how some of the tracks had a rock slant, which I've been begging Taylor to explore for years. A good mutual of mine on Twitter had told me they'd been hoping for a Plastic Hearts Taylor's version, and I think she'd kill it. I'm just gonna start the track by track because I have a lot of thoughts to go through. The anthology starts with The Black Dog, produced by Antonoff. It has a really cool rock edge to it. She starts the song lamenting an ex who hasn't turned off their location since their breakup, so she sees him walk into a bar called The Black Dog, presumably to pick up someone new. The Black Dog is a real bar in London and apparently a fixture in English folklore, serving as an omen. It's their version of a hellhound. The first chorus outs the song to be a part of the Matty Healy saga in that he covered the Starting Line song The Best of Me on tour. He jumps up knowing the song, but this new girl's just too young to know it. Old Habits Die Screaming's the best line, punctuated by some really interesting pulsing synths and guitars. Verse 2 calls back to Loss of My Life, which a few of you did tie back to Healy in the the comments of my last video. The second chorus calls back to Taylor's long-standing rain motifs. The bridge is another masterclass. The lines about hiring a priest to come and exorcise the demons and how it ties back to screaming is a very elegant rhyme. The final chorus ends with her wishing that it was Shitty at the bar because she knows he's a coward who's leaving with their tail between their legs. I'm Gonna Get You Back is another Antonov production. This one's very hooky and almost resembles a Haim track in construction. The song's title is probably a reference to Falling For You, a song from the 1975's earlier days, and one that Maddie himself had sang to Taylor at a concert a decade ago. This song's chorus feels like a direct answer to that song's mentioning the bike and the enormous house. The post-chorus is the hookiest part of the song in the way that she sings the eyes and punctuates it with your mind. I found that the verse's cadence reminded me of Gold Rush. The line comparing herself to an Aston Martin driven into a ditch evokes Red's Maserati down a dead-end street. It also calls back to The Smallest Man's Crashed Your Rental Car. The bridge flows so well. The bygones will be bygones. Eras fading into gray is a cool meta moment. The lines, pick your poison babe, I'm poison anyway, speaks to this belief that he's always going to come back to her somehow. And it feeds into that Delulu final chorus. The albatross is when the anthology begins to sound like folk evermore. Dessner takes on the co-producer chair and we get this mystical hymn. The opening lines set up a story about a man worried about the ills of woman. A rose by any other name is a scandal is a direct reference to Romeo and Juliet. I found the chorus to be literary gold. Contradictory and religious, cross your thoughtless heart, only liquor anoints you, liquor over holy water and half-hearted promises. The song's title is a direct call-out to the rhyme of The Ancient Mariner, an English poem written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. This story is about a traveler who shoots an albatross that he sees as an omen, and nature bites him back in the ass and kills his crew. He ends up having to travel to repent and warn people not to destroy nature. Swift cast herself in the role of the albatross, innocence tarred by reputation. She's cast unfairly as this danger when the act of destroying the albatross is what leads to your downfall. I think that it's gorgeous. It's a well-produced allegory for her life. Ironically, her dress at the Grammys resembled an albatross. Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus. This one continues the Healy saga. The first verse has her imagine who could have been that other person. The mention of the title even posits that the other person could be a man, but that's irrelevant. The decade would play us for fools line makes me think that this is Healy just because they met a decade ago. And the direct Travis reference with he would have bullied you in school is insane to me. The chorus is cutting. The repetition of Cold emphasizes how he could have just said if he'd love her regardless of form or era or reinvention. She would have stayed. Verse 2 expands on that by name-dropping a drug addiction on his end and how she focused on her work and how she had to transform herself just to escape how bad she felt. This could be about the Eras Tour being a coping mechanism. The bridge speaks to the feeling of regret before the damning third verse where she name-drops selling her apartment, his new girl, a reference to Maroon from Midnights, before reconfiguring the lyrics to You Always Wondered to It Just Didn't Happen. The outro implies she wonders if she'll always wonder about this what if. How Does It End speaks to the horror that people care more about a breakup happening than the people it's happening to. We hereby conduct this postmortem is said in jest. The chorus is pointed towards the media, even if she just tells her friends. People want to know why it happened or how it happened. Verse 2 cuts it pretty clean and simple that they had different wants and needs, but then it goes back to her closest friends being unable to not tell their partners or their cousins. The second chorus calls back to Champagne Problem story from the perspective of people gossiping, before the bridge takes us home. My personal favorite line is my beloved ghost and me sitting in a tree dying. That's just such a good line. The delivery makes the line. So High School is the superior Travis Kelce track. It's much stronger than The Alchemy. Dessner's soft rock production on this one makes me want a proper Taylor record even harder. It really channels a cool late 90s, early 2000s sheen. It reminded me of Hits Different, but it's joyous. The wrinkle and timeline especially. The post-chorus where she sings about watching American Pie with you on a Saturday night, it comes full circle to 15 because she's now dating the guy on the football team, hence her feeling so high school seeing him. The coming of age vibe from Marry, Kiss or Kill Me to opening car doors to Truth or Dare bottles is really cute. I see that the bridge is scrutiny to a lot of criticism because of that Grand Theft Auto line, but I think it's camp. You know how to ball, I know Aristotle cracks me up, but it's so earnest. It coming back as the outro reminds me of Cruel Summer structure. This one's a hit for me and has inspired me to write my next screenplay. The one that I wrote on Hits Different is actually in development. So my track record on writing scripts based on Taylor Swift songs is 2 for 2. I Hate It Here is a gorgeous track that reminded me of Seven and the Lakes from Folklore. It's definitely a track about pining for being anywhere but where you are in terms of time, place, and mindset. I think Folklore's biggest asset was being about escapism. The poet trapped inside the body of a finance guy captures it so well. She alludes to the classic children's lit novel The Secret Garden in the chorus. My favorite lines have to be no mid-sized city hopes or small-town fears. I've seen Taylor get flack for the line, I wish it was the 1830s without the racist, which honestly could have been phrased a bit better. I get the absurdist humor of it, but it is a distracting line in an otherwise great song. I really dug the bridge because it speaks to the way that the world has worn her out and how her fantasies continue to shield her from pain. Even a billionaire escapes in their wildest dreams. The world sucks, and I'm glad Taylor Swift is admitting it. Thank You Amy is the Kim Kardashian diss track that has been a long time coming. Taylor brings back the small town imagery and being bullied. This track is deliciously petty. The chorus evokes mean thematically, but references the way that Kim essentially triggered the Reputation era, which was a pivotal success and step in her journey. She's grateful for it, but she has the right to be mad it even had to happen. Verse 2 talks about how Amy stomped on her grave and wrote headlines. My standout line has to be when she says her saintly mother used to say that she wishes Amy was dead. That slayed me. The bridge itself is a testament to the fact that she's built herself up so high that she can't be destroyed again. Another standout line is in verse 3, your kid comes home singing a song only us two is gonna know is about you. Kim, you are dust. Melodically, this one actually reminded me of Marjorie, oddly. For people wondering why the song exists, even though it's been 8 years, would you forgive someone who leaked your phone call? Would you forgive someone who starred in a music video with their ex-husband with a naked mannequin of you that you did not commission or approve? I'd be mad myself, so go off, Taylor. I Look in Windows is a short, bittersweet little track anchored by a gorgeous guitar riff. It feels like an Evermore-ish take on Death by a Thousand Cuts, one of my personal favorite Lover tracks. It was co-produced by Patrick Berger, who did Slut on the 1989 Vault tracks. This track's ethereal nature makes it a standout. She looks at different people's windows because the love that she used to look through is now gone. She resorts to imagine what it'd be like to be in their shoes if it was him and her. She admits that she's addicted to, if only, looking into windows like a weirdo. I Attend Christmas Parties from Outside calls back that line, kids and Christmas but I'm unaware, from Right Where You Left Me, another track that I adore from her. The Prophecy returns to the ancient archetypical sound that she and Dessner craft so well. This song is a hat tip to her past, present, and future. She sings about her need to long and pine for companionship, and that this prophecy seems to doom her to success in everything but romance. Don't want money, just want someone who wants company speaks to this idea that she's doomed. Yet there's still this hopeful quality throughout the song. I really love the religious allegory of Eve being bitten. When she admits that she feels like an infant in the bridge, you sense real humility. There's a bit of shade in a greater woman stays cool, but she howls at the moon like a wolf. She keeps singing about greater women with faith, but statues crumbled if they're made to wait. It's a very intellectual, vulnerable song, which makes it fitting that Cassandra is the next track. Cassandra was a princess and a prophetess who was cursed by her ex Apollo to give accurate prophecies at the cost of never being believed. Sonically, it resembles Mad Woman. The call that she mentions is probably the infamous 2016 leak call. The chorus is about how they killed Cassandra because she was right, only to come to realize that they made a big mistake. The bridge posits that they knew the whole time that she was right, and it was just family and greed that kept them quiet. But they never spared a prayer for my soul is a bit shady. Despite how these people portray themselves as good Samaritans, their actions never match their words. I feel like the second half could really apply to Scooter's downfall as a manager, and how all his clients eventually dumped him. So like Cassandra, when doom and truth came for them, it was because they did not heed their warnings that Cassandra was ultimately vindicated. Peter is an interesting track as the opening sounds identical to August, which is one of my personal favorite Taylor tracks of all time. Though the folklorian link in this one is to Cardigan because of the Peter losing one day metaphor. This one feels like a continuation of that song. It opens with Forgive Me, Peter, and she mentions how the goddess of timing had lied to her. She thought that goodbye was just for now, but it's clear that he's never gonna grow up and come find her. My standout line has to be Promises Ocean Deep but never to keep. It's a very clean rhyme. I think the best writing is the writing where you use the least amount of words but you say so much. The bridge itself is extremely devastating. He said that he'd come get her at 25, but she's given up hope because he's still in the Lost Boys chapter of his life. So the song is ultimately her asking him to forgive her for moving on. The light at the window guiding him home is now turned off. I believe that's the last track about Maddie. The Bolter is a bouncier sounding track, akin to Betty and Ivy sonically, but the melody reminded me of our song in Getaway Car. It was one of the few songs that became a favorite on first listen. It's summery and bittersweet. Verse 1 sets her up as this curious child reviled by everyone but her dad, who nearly drowned at 6. People would come to joke that she's a bolter, a serial monogamist, someone who does run away. The chorus really paints the thrill of starting a relationship, but it always ends with her speeding away in a car. He'll call her a whore, and each time she leaves, she feels like she can breathe again. Verse 2 continues her pattern of jumping in and out. I found that the bridge is an admission that she's the one driving the car. Hearts are hers for the breaking. More often than not, escaping is better than staying. I think that it's a clever, meta, paradoxical song. It's kind of blank space by way of an older, wiser speak now. And I was personally insulted that 2 of my exes sent me the song saying, "This is you," but that's TMI. Robin is a cute, soaring little song that praises the power of the young imagination of a child. The title feels like a reference to Christopher Robin, or maybe even Aaron Dessner's own son, much like how Swift named characters after the Reynolds children in folklore. I really love the details of each verse. She's speaking to someone who likes to play pretend that they're an animal, or how they play with dinosaurs in the mud. "Way to go, Tiger" is something that you'd say to your son. The bridge confirms it by praising this kid's lack of regrets, or knowing how cruel or mean the world is, and how eventually one day they will learn how to bounce back, but right now it's the time for tenderness. It's a very sweet, innocent track. The manuscript ends the album, and it's one of the most experimental tracks. There is no chorus to the track, no hook. It feels like spoken word done over an instrumental. It feels like somewhat of a synopsis of her life so far as the manuscript. The first verse relays a torrid love affair about this older man who just wanted her body and how she should have known better. Verse 2 speaks to a time in her old relationship where all she wished to be was older and more mature. The line about eating children's cereal speaks to how young she was at that period. So she moved on and ended up dating boys her age. Her ex said that she'd been wise beyond her years, but looking back, she knows what he did was wrong. The bridge details how she came to realize what had happened to her, and how to write it and to make it into something, she knew that the agony had to be worth for something to share. Now the manuscript is likely a metaphor for her music, and now that's all that's left for her personally. Time has passed, and she's come to realize that this manuscript is no longer hers because it belongs to her audience now. They have taken the story and the music and reshaped it into things that resemble their own lives. I've seen some really cool theories that say that this is a direct sequel to All Too Well. Other people think that it's connected to The Story of Us. I think that it speaks to the entire body of canon of her work. It's a very powerful, neat coda to an insane double album. I have to rate the Anthology a stronger 9.4 out of 10. When I listened to it for the first time, I arrived at that score because it's just so much freer and vivid than the Standard, and it maintained that score. I think that the Standard is still decent, but there's a rigidity to it that becomes evident when you listen to the second half. The Anthology just contains stronger links to her seminal work and a more varied palette of sound and subjects. That's not to say that the Standard hasn't grown on me a bunch since temporarily leaving Twitter and watching the Fortnite video. I feel like the Poor Things-esque visuals and the expressionist acting that Swift and Post had were really solid. The visuals personally are my favorite part of that video and are antithetical to Karma's. I felt like it was a return to elegance, which is a word that I've used so much discussing tortured poets. I feel like it's an understated, mature kind of beauty. It's deceivingly complex outwardly, but at its core, simpler than you think. Having listened to both halves, I think it's still hard for me to reconcile and consider all 31 tracks as a single project. It's overwhelming and sprawling, so I adored the fact that there is a clear division between both records. I just think that it'd be unfair to grade the whole thing together. It'd be kind of like grading Kill Bill as a whole when it's actually 2 parts. Unless Tarantino puts a full cut of Kill Bill out, I still consider it 2 movies. I do think as a work, this is something that will continue to be studied and dissected for years to come, either as a misstep or as the beginning of a new start for Taylor. Whether to understand it better or to color in her future work down the line at least. At the very least, I've come to realize that this was sort of a necessary and proper reboot for Taylor Swift and a closing to a chapter in her artistry. I really hope the next record does sound distinctly different, and I'm confident that it actually will. And that's a wrap. I can finally exhale and breathe and not examine this record and enjoy it for what it is. I love doing these videos, but man, what a stressful release week this has been. I will say this is probably one of the most insane weeks I've ever witnessed as a pop stan. Seeing people react to the leaks and eventually get the double album, I honestly have not been this surprised in years. I just want to give a quick shout out to my members. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. A quick shout out to my subscribers. Thank you so much for tuning back into my videos each week and listening to me prattle on about pop. We are so close to 20,000 subscribers, so tell your friends to watch, subscribe, share this video, comment below what your favorite Anthology track was. Do you think it's a better album than the standard? And what do you think TS12 is going to sound like? Like, subscribe, comment. I will see you next video, which will be sooner than you think. But I do need a break. Maybe I'll talk about Chapel Road. Maybe. Okay, bye.